Israeli people who don't have an immediate connection to Jews in the diaspora do not understand the meaning of this connection.
Sharona Zablodovsky, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Fantastic, fantastic. These next 20 minutes, there's a lot of topics to cover. The primary one in the center of them is the Jewish diaspora and Israeli nature. But your work spans across nonprofit organizations beyond that. And I would love to start with your journey and where you come from and how you end up being such an advocate and a proactive member of the group that's trying to work through the complicated nature of the Jewish people. So, Sharona, before we get to that complicated topic, I'd love to start off with who you are, going back all the way to when you were getting your bachelor's and your master's.
Okay. So I think that the turning point for me was after a few years that I worked in the Israel Film Fund and I worked in the National Theater Habima, and I had like this glamorous positions in very cool places, and it was fun, but it wasn't my place. It didn't feel like the right match. So I thought to myself after graduation, okay, so I studied this public policy MA. It was very inspiring, but I said to myself, something has to change. Like my track wasn't the track. So I just decided, okay, now I'm going to act differently. I didn't know what I'm going to do. I didn't know what I'm going to learn, but I understood that I have to go and just jump in the water and see how it goes. So one morning in the summer, I sat here in Tel Aviv, in the center of Tel Aviv, and drank coffee near my house. And I saw an article about the education system in Israel. And I said to myself, okay, I want to work in something with impact. I want to do something meaningful. I'm very connected to values in the nonprofit world. Let's see what can I do. So one article talked about the education, and it was like a table of all the organizations that work in field in-source and outsourcing for children of all ages. And I saw that there is a lot of funding for this field, and it's very impactful.
Right.
And I said to myself, okay, if there is so many resources, I can find work, right? Because I wanted to step and progress my experience in work in the workspace. And I said, okay, let's call all these organizations and I will find work. I was very naive. It was very cute, by the way. But things turned differently. So I started calling all these places and started checking and trying to find work. And I didn't find work. And one place, by the way, got back to me. I went to an interview and they offered me a very low salary. And I said, okay, this is not the place for me. I will not take the first option that I have. So time goes by. I understood that I think my passion is more of a informal education.
Hmm.
And so I started
By the
checking
way, what
and
was it about education that you were so infatuated with at that moment? So were you
yeah.
thinking about it for a while? Were you just all of a sudden you were reading the article and you were like, oh, okay, wow, there's this whole world here that
Mhm.
I've yet to explore that makes a lot of sense to me. What was it that really attracted you to that field?
I think mostly I understood that there are 2 million kids in Israel that goes to learn in the educational system, and it's when you want to affect society and how it will build and the future of Israel. I think that it's the most powerful tool, because everybody has to go to school. Everybody. It doesn't matter which
Right.
sector you are. So if you want to impact 2 million kids, I think it's very impressive
Right.
that you
So I
can
think
have
that
that.
a parallel that I like to make here, and I get to talk to quite a few entrepreneurs that are also they're describing the way that they reached their idea and their
Mhm.
eventual company, is that this is a very bottoms up approach, right? You're looking at what's happening. Okay, so we have 2 million kids. What's common for these 2 million kids? They're all going to school. On the other hand, I'm trying to figure out how I can make a positive impact on the state of Israel as a whole. And
Mhm.
given that there's 2 million kids going to school, this is a very direct way of pretty much impacting every single person that's going to grow into this greater generation that's going to be in the workforce, right? If you impact the education sphere today, you're actually impacting the workforce in 5 to 10 years. And it has a big butterfly effect moving forward. For me, that makes me curious about how do people identify key areas that they can have a positive impact. And I'm thinking about that for myself as I'm going to go into my own ventures one day. But I just wanted to set that aside because that's one of the things that I'm truly passionate about in uncovering through this show.
Yeah. So I think that when I realized the capacity that is impacted, and as you mentioned, it's the future of Israel at the end of the day, like each country. So what I found out during seeking for work, not for anything, I didn't even know about the existence of the entrepreneurship world. I wasn't aware of that at all
Wow.
because I had this DNA of nonprofit. I thought, okay, life. I had like this set of beliefs that life is A, B, C, and that how it goes. But when decided to act differently, I had like different opportunities. So I started to seek for each place meetups, places, lectures, everything that is beside or in this content.
Right.
So I started going and I started asking people and I met people and I just wanted work, by the way. I didn't have any intention to do anything that is like building
Wow.
or having new creation. None of that. But the thing is that the more people that I came across, the more I understood that the content is getting out of the education ministry. And that means that kids are learning different values in different areas in Israel,
Right.
which means if kids are brought up in a more developed, more wealthy surrounding, they will have more opportunities.
Right.
And when I was growing up, it wasn't like that. It was public school. Everybody went to the same school, same values, same, opportunities. So you had the same cards.
Right.
Um, yeah, so in a 9 million population, we're not a big country, but still, it's a game changer when you have more opportunities as a child.
So how does that
So
then translate to your passion of the Jewish diaspora and the Israeli people? Because until now we're talking about, internally within the state of Israel, how education is impacting the kids growing up in Israel. How do you then, become involved with this whole other, industry or ecosystem that is not necessarily directly correlated with the education within Israel?
yeah, well, by chance, I got into the discourse of Israel diaspora relationship. I got into this amazing opportunity through AJC, and I'm very grateful for that. I went on a delegation to DC at 2016, and I always was fascinated by this relationship. And personally, I have a family in the US,
Hmm.
but I never. It was, by the way, the first time that I was in the US, and until I wasn't there, I didn't understood how meaningful it was, even though I have family there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the connection between education and the Jewish diaspora, Israel diaspora relationship combines that for me now, as reflecting back, I think that what we need in society in Israel is to learn about our history and the history of, by the way, all diaspora, not only American Jews, okay? Because there was a turning point. Israel was established. It was a, race to build a new country, which is a wonder itself, but
Right.
it's another topic. And we went to different routes, different like challenges in life because we're a majority. Jewish diaspora is minority, so we have a lot of things that are very different, but the same because we have same history, same values. We share a lot of things together. So I think that now, looking back, I think if local leadership would embrace the studies of the holistic situation and also learning about the streams in Judaism,
Mm-hmm.
it will make us stronger as a global nation. And I think it will be very beneficial for Israelis in general, because I think that personally, Israeli people who don't have an immediate connection to Jews in the diaspora do not understand the meaning of this connection.
Right. So I'd
Because
love to provide a little bit more context to both, my Israeli friends who don't necessarily have that direct connection, or to my American Jewish friends who don't necessarily have that connection, or to anybody in the world that's listening that doesn't necessarily know about this interesting situation that we're caught up in. So, can
Mhm.
you give me a little bit of context? How many Israelis are there in Israel? How many Jews are there outside of Israel? Where are they located around the world? And why aren't everybody just coming into Israel? Or what? Why is there even an issue? Why is it a problem that they're there and we're here?
Okay, so in Israel, we're about 7 million, give or take, something like that. In the US, it's somewhere around, as far as I know today, 5 million, maybe 5.5. It's like it's very similar capacity, like Israel and the North American community. In general, there is a small community in Russia. There are in Latin America communities.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more of the same total. I think Jews around the world, total minority of like 14 million or something like that. It's
Right.
like very, very small nation. Um, I think that the situation now, and I'm very passionate, as you mentioned about it. I
Mm-hmm.
think that local leadership is not dealing with this situation. Of course, we have the COVID now. The coronavirus is like questioning everything. It's
Mm-hmm.
like a game changer, and we have to adapt to and solve the problems regarding health issues, regarding the economics, regarding everything. But there's a turning point that if the policymaking, let's say, leaders will not take the situation to their own hands here, I think that it will be very, very, the circumstances could be very, very bad
So I'm still
because
trying to understand what is the issue. So, on
the
one
issue.
level, so on one level, yes, I think that, obviously Jews around the world, they are support. Most of them are big supporters of Israel. They are part of the miracle of the nation of Israel. But why is there a problem today that there are 5.5 million Jews in the U.S., some in Latin America, some in Russia, some in Israel? I mean, Israel is pretty dense, right? I mean, there's a lot of people here,
Mhm.
crowded in the streets. So we don't necessarily have room to have 17 million people in Israel right now. What is the both what is the issue right now, and what is the absolute best vision or the ideal situation that you think we should strive for if what we have now is not ideal?
Okay. I think first of all, I don't think that everybody should do Aliyah. I don't hold this like way of thinking. I think that you can be Zionist and live abroad wherever you like, because eventually Israel is the home spiritually
Right.
and physically for the Jewish nation. So it doesn't matter where you live, it's the home that the Jewish people yearn for
Right.
like 2,000 years. So I think that everybody can leverage from the fact that we have this big present. The main gap is because of the streams. In the last century, give or so, they became a few streams in Judaism, which has different aspects to them. And I think that's the main problem, because the different streams want to go their way. Like in Israel, most of Israel is belonging to the Orthodoxy,
Mm-hmm.
and Judaism in the diaspora is conservative, is reform, and also Orthodoxy. So the streams there are different, and we are majority. Jews diaspora are minority. They have
Right.
different challenges in life.
Sure.
So we as Israelis don't know that, because we're used to, hey, it's my it's a different game.
Of course.
So I think that mainly, and there is a legislation now in the Knesset of the Ministry of Diaspora and another MK that is dealing with opening a setting of direct consulting between the Knesset
Hmm.
and the Jews in the diaspora leaders. So, and it doesn't exist, and I have to say I'm very surprised that it doesn't exist till today, because we belong to the same nation.
Right.
Of course, that this legislation is not aimed to interfere in sovereignty, because people who are not citizens in Israel cannot vote, therefore cannot decide
Right.
about security issues, but on matters, and I think it's very, very important. And by the way, I have to say and emphasize, this is my own personal opinion, that it's very important to have a discourse, even though you might not, the streams I refer, even if the streams will not agree, they have to talk.
Sure.
They have to talk. So, because there is a lack of communication and lack of knowledge, by the way, here and abroad
Sure.
and in the diaspora, I think that there is like misunderstanding,
Sure.
because how we can get along, like this gap is based on that. And if we open a channel and accept one another, the streams, it will be easier to provide everybody a future, because we have still the same goals. We still belong to the same nation, even though it expresses different otherwise. Like the streams have different, like day to day, they see things differently. But we have seen, unfortunately, the prices, heavy prices that the Jewish people in the last century paid,
Right.
and we don't want to go back there. So,
Sharona, I have to say, I think that what you're saying is absolutely right. I think that, and the miscommunication, the lack of communication, or the lack of
mhm,
effort to really understand and step into the shoes of the other. And obviously, we know that,
mhm,
Israeli Jews, they act a little differently than perhaps American Jews or Latin American Jews. Cultural reasons, just like I, as an Israeli, act differently from a lot of my friends at Stanford that are American, and we accept that. And the difference is that perhaps they're since I'm situated there, I get to explain myself a lot. My directness and my chutzpah sometimes may come across, insulting, and then I have a chance to explain the misunderstanding. And I'm personally very involved with a fund called the J Ventures, with Red Chilmoni, which I'm sure that you know, because one of the goals of this fund is to connect the Israeli Jews and the diaspora Jews. And I believe that he also took part in one of the programs that you did. And it's been a very rewarding experience working with investors and entrepreneurs and executives, both from Israel and from Latin America and Russia and the US and all around the world. So I'm definitely, I understand the urgency of what you're saying and the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, and I get to enjoy, bridging that gap on a daily basis. But Sharona, before we have to end, I want to thank you for being generous with your time and for joining me here. And I have to ask for 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
I think that the 3 words that will describe me is perseverance, optimism, and learning. I think it's very important for evolving and
I love
for
it.
growing.
Sharona, thank you very
Yeah.
much. This was great.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you. You too. Bye.